In the kitchen. Is that nearby? Yeah, the den right near the. Yeah, it was either in the dining room. Like, you're just like, why is it here?
Terrible at gift cards.
I am.
I think that's what you said.
It's working. We have a lot of good.
Yeah, you know. Enthusiasm counts for a lot. Okay, I didn't do great at that one. And this is not working. But, okay, now I think I've got it. So, like I went through that very before, right? I'm like, before, and it was so clear.
Yeah, so this is,
So, I need to do slow down.
Lori, I'm gonna ask you to try that sign in again.
Oh, there you go.
That is a different phone. Try that stuff that includes, like, he can send me something. He doesn't figure it out. He like thinks so. I got my partner, and he said, someone's out. Yeah, I think it's on his phone.
Not nice.
I'm not that way.
It's not sure.
I think it's the creative side. I'm too like
Well, the issue is that
intentional
it's
about everything.
something-
Yeah.
I make them, you know.
That's perfectly.
So you wanna follow the phone?
Absolutely.
But he's like,
There's not-
It's fine.
my favorite.
can I let all these people? It's all the same.
No.
So, yeah.
He has lots of different.
Let's make sure we get this. Let's not add the pressure of these people.
He's just, yeah, he's played for a long time and. He just moves around.
Make it fun.
Okay. Hey, you're in. We think. We're the student.
And they have all these songs.
Yeah, so- I don't think that- Howard.
They were. They're way ahead of me.
Oh, that's
There you
cool.
go.
That's hilarious.
Very good.
Yeah. I don't play it very well, but.
I can do that. Purple, is it purple haze?
Oh, okay.
Oh, not seven, right? Dun, 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 dun. There you go. I can do that one.
I have it here, so that it's more even on there.
Yeah, that's right. All righty. It is 6 o'clock on the dot. Let's go ahead and begin oh, I hear an echo. That's gonna drive me nuts. So if you have your cameras on, computers on, please don't. Let's go ahead and call this budget committee meeting to order at 6 o'clock. Please all rise for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Lori, roll call.
Thank you very much. Chris Barron,
Present.
Lisa Fry, Larry Gonzalez,
Here,
thank you.
here.
David Hatcher,
Here.
Cindy Hurst,
Yeah.
Tom Murdoch,
Here.
Mark DeForge,
Sure.
James Page.
Here.
Am I looking at, sorry, I don't have my glasses. Mandy Hagedorn. I'm
Here.
Michelle McCall Wallace. Here. Krista Papen, present. Katie Redding. Here. And Commissioner Dumbrow, are you online?
Present.
Thank you. And Ariel Goodwin is excused this evening.
All right. Perfect.
That means
We all came back. That's a good sign. So first order of business tonight we have is the approval of the minutes from May 22nd's meeting. Those should all be in your, or not May 22nd. That is backwards in the agenda. Last week's meeting, we've had a chance to review those. I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion to approve.
First, do I hear a second?
One second.
All right, first and seconded, any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? And did we get our folks online as well? I
I
saw,
heard both of them.
perfect, all right. That brings us, we're just gonna fly through this tonight, it's gonna be great. First, before we dive in to public comment, did you want to go ahead and read the budget message into?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So I'm just gonna go ahead and read the full budget message into the record. Just so it's out there. I mean, it's in the document, of course, but let me go ahead. This is actually, it's not a requirement, but the budget message is an important part of the process, including it's under statute. So we'll take the extra step of reading it into the record. So
Yes, please.
Honorable Mayor, City Councilors, and Budget Committee members, it is with pleasure that I present our budget proposal for the years of fiscal year 25-26 through 26-27. After several years of growth, North Plains will transition back to more steady population beginning in the next 2 years. This comes with the opportunity to move city focus from actively managing change to identifying best ways to deliver needed services to residents and maintaining critical infrastructure sustainably. I've summarized some of the key trends and budget elements for the new biennium below. New city leadership and priorities. At the beginning of 2025, City Council added 5 new members, including a new mayor, and with that change, a diversity of new perspectives to shape new directions for the city. City Council has worked to consensus on new goals and budget priorities for the new biennium that shape this budget, as will be discussed in more detail in this document. The 25-27 biennial budget follows the lead of City Council with a shift from significant growth planning to delivery of services and infrastructure, including enhanced public safety, additional investment in public facilities and their maintenance, and enhancement of resident services with an emphasis on recreational and education programming. City and fiscal transition. The Bryn Hill development is expected to be fully built out in the middle of the new biennium. This will mean a very rapid slowdown in land use applications and development review and approval, along with a major reduction in development-driven fees. This budget reflects a significant downsizing of the community development department, the shift in its focus to urban renewal and enhancement of the economic vitality of the Glencoe Road and downtown commercial street corridors to grow businesses, employment, and amenities for our residents. While planning and land use approval is winding down, the city does expect to continue to grow in population over the next 2 years as home building wraps up in the final 2 phases of Bryn Hill. This implies 2 more years of growing operating revenues for our general fund department services, our water utility, and streets utility. This biennial budget reflects city services and facilities maintenance enhancements by harnessing those resources. But we fiscally plan with an eye toward the future after this biennium, where growth in property taxes are capped at 3% annually under Measure 50, while substantial service cost growth the city cannot control can regularly grow by up to 8% annually. Washington County, one of the city's major funding partners, and now Beaverton both continue to face annual budget cuts and layoffs, in no small part due to the property tax growth cap of 3% under Measure 50. For this reason, this biennial budget approaches growth in services incrementally. The biggest example is the plan for an additional full-time equivalent FTE police officer under our Washington County Sheriff's Office contract for additional frequently overnight in town coverage. But that additional deputy is planned to be funded by a proposed new monthly enhanced patrol fee for our water utility customers. As Measure 50 constrains the funding of city services, much like most other communities in Oregon, the importance of finding other revenue sources besides regular support for the general fund from the city's water fund cannot be overstated. Capital programs and special projects. With very little development activity expected in the next 2 years and beyond, our capital funds will see little new system development charge, SDC, and transportation development tax, TDT, revenue to replenish expended resources for additional future projects. Capital projects in this biennial budget reflect careful planning to best utilize resources for existing project lists with little expectation of additional revenues upon completions. The City Urban Renewal Agency, URA, will grow in its importance for the city in the next 2 years as the city focuses on economic vitality within city limits. Extending the sunset date for the Urban Renewal Agency and a substantial plan amendment to tackle new and vital projects for the city economy. Glencoe Opportunity Area Grocery Center Corridor Anchor, new downtown improvement plan projects, new incentives and programs to facilitate property investment, new businesses, and new jobs. Continued improvements with finance and budget practices. This biennial budget includes a new buildings and maintenance fund and an internal services fund supported by all departments and operating funds to better budget for and carry out adequate maintenance of city assets. The movement of various buildings and grounds costs out of department and operating funds budgets into this new fund also means department and fund budgets better reflect the focus of direct services delivery and cost. This also allows the ability to approach cost efficiencies by planning service contracts across facilities and other assets citywide. As the new city manager for North Plains, working in partnership with much new leadership on the North Plains City Council, this budget is intended as a significant beginning of delivery of new priorities and goals for the city with an emphasis on stewardship of resources. With the staff dedicated to service to North Plains, I fully welcome all questions, dialogue, and constructive process that yields the best value of services to North Plains residents. Thank you, Bill Reed, City Manager.
Perfect. Thank you, Bill. Yeah, I can say after a long meeting last week, you definitely delivered a budget that hit those priorities. I think we all had enough comments about how we're impressed to see that the priorities that came from city council were then delivered through a budget. And I think tonight it's just time to hear from the community. So with that, we're going to move into public comment. Public comment is, we don't have any folks here with us, but I see that there's folks online. So before giving public comment, the outline for this is I'm gonna say we're gonna allow 3 minutes. There's not a ton of people, and I want to give those that have come the opportunity to share what's on their mind. But for those that wish to give public comment, please state your name, if you are a resident of North Plains, and when we ask if you're a resident, there is a big distinction between within the city boundary and outside the city boundary. So we would like a clear designation. Are you within the city boundary limits? Are you outside of the city boundary limits? And then you are welcome to give your public comment. We're excited to hear it. So with that, is there anyone, we don't have anyone in the room, is there anyone online who wish to give public comment at this time? I'm gonna give it a couple minutes just in case there's any technical difficulties. And if you have any technical difficulties coming off mute, please put into the chat so we can recognize that. Oh, there's no chat, just kidding. Thank you, Councilor.
They could just unmute themselves.
Okay, perfect. All right. Hearing none, there's no public comment. Which, that is a majority of our meeting tonight. So at this time, we do have some revisions you had. All right, perfect. Bill, will you please share the revisions that were highlighted? Thank you.
Good evening, Budget Committee. There you all are. Thank you very much for your service on the committee and reviewing everything. These first few slides are just a rehash of what you saw before. So this is the second Budget Committee meeting, hearing and discussing the new proposed budget for the 25-27 biennium. If the proposed city budget or the proposed URA budget, if either one of those are not voted for approval tonight, if there's continued discussion, we would move to additional discussion and addressing any revisions requested. We would move that to a week from tonight, Thursday, May 29th, if needed. So that's on the calendar as a potential additional meeting. So just want to be clear about that. This committee does need to approve some version with revisions if necessary. A proposed budget needs to approve it. And then council has to take up the approved budget and adopt a budget before June 30th, basically. So that we can submit to the state and be consistent with state law. So that's just kind of the process we're in. Rehashed quick expenditure control budgeting method. Departments get to save money they don't spend, roll it forward. I have your budget priorities that were recently recognized with adoption of a resolution. Let's see. Okay, to the substance so we can get into it. So basically, I hear based on Lori's and my notes of comments or questions or asks of clarification that I got in the meeting, and then I got one or two offline that kind of got at some numbers or questions about numbers. So let me just go through these. Number one, we had a conversation about the boards and commissions department professional services budget. Looking high and might be an error. The budget, the current biennium budget and the current amount that will probably be spent by the end of the biennium looked about half of this number in the $60,000 to $65,000 range. And it looked like perhaps the proposed budget for professional services for the biennium was a mistake. It looked like it might have been double what it was intended to be given historical spending in that expense line item. So I went back and looked, and indeed, there was just a equals with some kind of inflation adjustment rather than, but it was basically, rather than just an adjustment with inflation, there was an odd math error. So indeed, that the 114,200 that's in the 240 that's in the proposed budget as you've seen it was too high. And I am proposing reducing that amount back down to $60,000, which would be roughly consistent with prior budget in that category. And that a category of expense is basically consultants, different types of consultants for city council to visioning, goal setting, policy discussion, visioning planning, kind of consultants to help council inform, figure out process for different policy directions and working with the community on figuring out outreach plans and things like that. So it's kind of all-purpose consulting for council purposes is what that category is. So I've recommended bringing that back down to consistent with prior budget of $60,000. And then over here, you can't see, let me do this. Oh, no, that's what we want. So what I've done is, I just note that a revision is necessary, or I'm making one, who was part of it. And then where one will see the edits once made. So that would be an expense line item change that you would see in the boards and commissions detailed expenditures page. You would see it then also in the boards and commissions department summary page, which is revenues versus expenses or expenses versus revenues. And then in the budget document, you would see the kind of, you would see changes as well because of that. So that's the first one.
Do you hit Control Plus a couple times?
I can,
Thank you.
sure, no problem,
For the blind people.
but it's not.
Would it help if I turn off the other light too?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, contest.
Let's see if that
Thank you.
We ain't forgot to write a light.
Do I need to stop screen sharing first?
Excellent.
Oh, here we go.
Great. Control scroll.
Control scroll is the one, but
Yeah,
Okay,
perfect. That is so much
Right.
better.
there we go. Thank you for pointing it. Looks better to me than it does look to you up there. Well, I can see it closer here, so sorry about that. So the second one in the same spreadsheet, actually the immediate line below it. It was pointed out that that boards and commissions department attorney expenses, legal services expenses of $68,000 looked low. The budget and then the current year expenditures in the proposed budget, what you see for 23-25 to date and what's expected by the end of the year is over $100,000, quite significant, significantly higher. And the thought was, the comment was, $68,000 looks low. Practically speaking, perhaps it should be higher just for need, that sort of thing. But compared to the current year and the amount of money spent, it looked much smaller. So I went back, the original adopted budget for 23-25 for legal services for boards and commissions was actually only $65,000. And that was the basis for my $68,000 recommendation for this biennium. Now, during the course of this biennium, of course, legal issues regarding the urban growth boundary expansion that was, previously proposed and all the vote and all that. All the legal expenses related to that before and after significantly increased the amount the city actually spent on legal services. So the $68,000 in the proposal right now, it was still commented that it looked like it might be modest and should come up. So what I'm proposing, and you all get to discuss and approve it if you like, But I'm proposing bumping that up closer to $80,000 rather than $68,000, which seems a midpoint between roughly between 100 and, or an attempt at a midpoint of some kind, to give some more legal services need budget cushion as needed, but acknowledging that what's been spent in this biennium is an outlier in terms of being high. And we would not want to budget for that again, is the bottom line. So that's my proposal recommendation for a modification to that based on what I heard and then from you all and then looked into.
So quick question, what should they charge per hour?
The rate we pay is a little over 300 an hour.
Our city council meets in like 4 hours and they have the attorney sitting there the whole time. And they're not paid for the time sitting, and time paid for driving there as well, right?
Right, so
So it's $1,000 a meeting.
it's over that. So 16 to 1,700, depending how long the meeting goes.
So our 2-year budget's gonna be $80,000?
I'm assuming we will not need the city attorney at every meeting, the whole meeting. For instance, she will not be here at the next, well, she wasn't at the meeting on this previous Monday night. And I've discussed with her that I think that on most things, we're in a spot where it's just unnecessary expense. But things are probably going to come up on the agenda where having the resource either for part of it or all of it would be a good idea. So we can arrange that. But I don't anticipate needing her at every single meeting, the whole meeting.
Even if we, just to clarify, even if she was at every meeting, just simple math, that's still within budget. I mean, it's 67,000 and some change. And so this budget does take into account if she was going to be there, he or she was going to be present.
Yeah, I mean,
But let's hope not.
no, I mean, the thing is, and I agree that if you add up those numbers, it does come out in under the amount proposed, but Ashley does a lot of offline looking into things, responding to city council questions, working with me on certain. Now, having said that, this is not the only legal services expense account in the budget.
Because it's not a finance administration.
So we have a finance and administration department where she reviews contracts for me. She researches if we have a complicated contract and a complicated amount that we spend on it, and should we contract this way again, or should it be different? How many competitive bids should we get under the law on that? Like, there's a bunch of stuff that she does that's pure contract insurance, reviewing this, that, the other, that has, this expense account is really meant to be legal services to council for council discussions, actions, and all that. It's really kind of council stuff rather than city administrative stuff.
Okay, Commissioner Caldwell.
Yeah, I'm just gonna step into policy for a moment and out. I think that, when we look at this, that we as a council, for the city council and the mayor can look at ways that we could be more cost effective in this area. And for example, not every email that gets sent among people in the city needs to go to the city attorney, which is something that's happening currently. So I think we can stop and have an agenda discussion down the road that says, how do we want to better streamline this?
Thank you. Any other questions about those two items that Bill's covered so far? No, let's keep it rolling.
Okay, I think the weirdest looking thing that looked like an error on the budget pointed out was why are 0.4 FTEs costing us?
Yeah, we all wanted that job. He said, take that.
Maybe you don't want that job. Okay, so yes, it was an error. Obviously, but I looked in and found out what was going on and I've made the change. It's super easy. So the community development, our urban renewal agency as a separate legal entity and everything that it does in terms of community redevelopment and this, that, and the other. The urban renewal agency doesn't actually employ anyone. Okay, it's purely programmatic expenditure. Now, I and Rowan and mostly Rowan and myself, but a little bit of Lori, staff do things carrying out the mission of the urban. There isn't a robot somewhere talking to the developers and making the debt service payments and yada yada. So there is staff time. but the staff time for carrying out for people carrying out the duties of, and policies and programs of the Urban Renewal Agency is actually carried out as a personnel expense of the Community Development Department. And then the Urban Renewal Agency reimburses the Community Development Department for that staff time. And so the 0.4 number you see there was the number of FTEs in the Community Development Department only for planning and like community development stuff, planning and code enforcement and those sorts of things. It didn't include the FTEs from Urban Renewal Agency. It didn't include that number, even though the budget for community development includes all the work of staff and the cost of it, including for urban renewal stuff. It didn't include the FTE number for URA work. So I've changed that. So now the FTEs are 1.5 in community development for a roughly total personnel cost of about $200,000 annually for 1.5 FTEs. So if for almost 2 people, payroll, expenses, overhead, PERS, all that fun stuff, it does add up. So I double checked it. So it wasn't just 4.4 FTE, it's 1.5. So that's been corrected. It was an error.
Any questions, comments?
Okay, number 4. I got a comment offline, not in the meeting, about library budget transfers out don't look like they add up. Please check that. As in there was some kind of error identified in it sounded like money transferred out of the library department to another fund or something to pay for something. So I looked at it, and indeed, in the library budget, the library now transfers funds to the new building and grounds maintenance fund for upkeep and improvement to and contract management for HVAC and security and all that. That's all those activities for the buildings that the library uses. All of that activity is now in that new building and grounds maintenance fund, and the library transfers out funds annually to pay for its share of those costs. And there was a less than $5,000, but there was still a discrepancy between what the library budget showed transferring out and what the buildings and grounds maintenance fund showed receiving from the library. So there was an inconsistency, a discrepancy. That's been fixed. And so the transfers out proposed from the library to the new fund for building maintenance and upkeep now matches what the new fund reflects as being received from the library. So there was a discrepancy there. So that's been fixed, but it wasn't a big one, but it was one. So. All right. It's gonna let me forward.
You have to probably scroll out and then.
No. There we go. Okay, now I'm scrolling.
Yeah.
One more step for how to work. PowerPoint. Okay, and then we were kind of reviewing numbers and taking a look at it, and there is an update on a kind of an important matter that we wanted to have reflected in the budget. So number 1, the library will be getting a brand new fiber connection for broadband, and internet use in the annex building. That fiber connection is going to cost $15,000, but we fully expect, MAC is aware, the Metropolitan Area Communication Commission is fully aware of the project. This is a fully public, enhanced internet connection expense. And there's a very low probability that we wouldn't get a grant to reimburse us for this. So, but that $15,000 project is not reflected in the budget. So the change as proposed is to add the $15,000 project expense to physically put new fiber to the annex building in the buildings and grounds maintenance fund, a new $15,000 expense to do this. And then the library budget is proposed to show a $15,000 restricted grant received to pay for this. And then a $15,000 transfer of funds from the library to the Buildings and Grounds Maintenance Fund, because that'll be the fund that will track, account for, and do that improvement. So it's not, it's pretty similar to how, in a way, it's pretty similar to how the Jesse Mays AV improvements were planned. We have $60,000 sitting in reserve for the Jesse Mays building. MAC is working with us on a plan probably to spend about 110, 120, up to $120,000 on big AV improvements for this facility. We'll pay for half of it, but they are working with the contractor on the bids to figure out what the best solution is. And MAC is committed to their share of the project. So it's kind of the same thing. We're budgeting for an expense, expecting that, expecting it to be extremely low probability we wouldn't get reimbursed for it. So it's the same sort of thing. The same agency reimbursing us and you know, an AV, an internet improvement to the library. So that's what that is. An update. So Robin and I, this Monday afternoon, you know, because getting done with the meeting right before city council is always a fun thing for Wickles to plan for us. We went to a meeting that lasted like this, mercifully this time it was only 2 hours. But they're refining and coming closer to having the new planned formula for providing a basic minimum amount of money for all of its library, all the member libraries in Washington County, to get, you know, a different revenue amount, a different amount of money from the county based on this new formula. In the proposed budget, Robin and I assumed we were being conservative by saying, let's show a gain of $400,000 in revenue from the county in FY27. That would be the first year this would happen. In the second year of this biennium. So in FY27, the second year of the biennium, we assumed it would be, you know, 400,000 seems safe. At the meeting on Monday, with refinements to the plan, they, in not a small amount, revised the methodology in a way that bumps the number up for us. So now 400, we're pretty sure we'll get at least $450,000 out of the change rather than closer to 400. So I'm proposing showing something closer to that. And in FY27 showing $440,000 received from the county in FY27. So that would be a proposed change based on how the process is going to move forward and has been communicated to the County Board of Commissioners. The final thing is the library needs to update or replace carpet. Probably the original carpet in the building from when it was originally fundraised and built. Wear and tear just needs to be replaced. Our best guess at that right now for just getting it in the budget purposes is about $35,000. So without a grant reimbursement in this case, it's a similar type of proposed edit. There's a new capital expense in the Buildings and Grounds Maintenance Fund of $35,000 for carpet replacement in the library building. And then the addition of a transfer of about $35,000 from the library to the Buildings and Ground Maintenance Fund to pay for the project accounted for in the Building and Grounds Maintenance Fund. So it's kind of a similar looking type of transaction. So those are the three kind of staff saw something, we missed something, or something needed to be updated, proposed changes. That's about it. Unless in our notes, we missed something completely. That's about all we heard or got offline otherwise, in terms of numbers.
Any questions, comments? Did we miss anything?
I have a question. Where at in our current budget do we account for the nice front desk lady that we just added?
She's pretty much the finance and administration
Okay.
department. Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of, the water fund pays for a little bit of her, like a little bit of her salary, because she does help with, you know, paying invoices for the water utility. When people walk in to pay their water bill, she's the one that accepts payment, answers questions on the phone, reviews some of the invoices during the process for controls. So she does a bit, so there's a little bit, but it's mostly finance and administration.
Got it, okay. Can I ask one more question?
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry.
Absolutely.
In spirit of, Sunday's current events, that had me thinking about how we're funding for the enhanced police services.
Mhm.
And this could also be my misunderstanding, but I'm hoping we could talk about this a little bit more. It sounds like we were planning on funding for the water via, leveraging a water bill fee or potentially, thank you. Or potentially a levy, and to me, it kind of feels, it landed a little bit maybe indeterminate. And I wasn't sure, like, if we could circle back and talk about that and talk about that a little bit more. If there's any
Guess what the
choice
very
points.
next slide is, council. Yes,
Can you turn the lights back off?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Those slides.
yeah. I mean, honestly, I want to endorse your gut, and that's really kind of the big unresolved thing.
Yeah.
Is this. And so the next few slides, we don't have to, this is just a rehash of what you saw at the previous presentation, just to show what over the past few years, what our contract cost has been and what the cost increases are, that sort of thing. And then just to show that in this proposed biennium, which isn't resolved, is the assumption that the proposal to add one FTE to our current 3 and make it a total of 4. So instead of 1 sergeant and 2 deputies, FTEs, 1 sergeant and 3 deputies, with the additional deputy picking up different current gaps in schedule during the week. And that could include overnight, it could include changing schedules so that it's not overnight, but you got someone starting earlier in the morning and the second shift ends, however. So Chief can elaborate on different options, permutations of that. And I don't know that we need that right now, but that's the idea is.
And my thought was that this could pay for itself if we eliminate the full-time coverage. So we pay a premium per officer, like another 50%, we pay overtime. On top of regular salaries, just so we can always have somebody there for those hours. If we bring in one more person and we stop cutting that overtime, that's having to have to pay him. There's a risk that somebody could get shot, or maybe they go vacation and they can't be there for that time, or they have to go to jury, or who knows, right? There's a risk they can't be there for that time, but that's a smaller risk than paying for the insurance, the extra 50%. So if we get an extra officer, you drop that full-time coverage, you may be able to swing it at near the same cost. That's what you came up with, right?
So
It's 1.75%, so 75% more.
right, so so if Chief is on and he cares to get into the details of what can be changed and what can't be. So right now, so this is the 3 different scenarios basically that generally speaking have, and Chief can comment on where different things can be massaged or where they can't be. But the first column is the cost from the county for this coming fiscal year for 1 chief, 1 sergeant, and 2 deputies, okay? The total cost for that, and then all in, that includes the cost for the vehicles they use, the bullets, the training, the this, that, the other, everything, all in. We don't do anything but let them sit in the new building at a desk. But everything included, all inclusive, is $841,123. Okay, and that does include the shift differential component that Councilor Page was talking about. So the second scenario, and the second scenario in front of you is what the budget proposes. It proposes bumping up the number of deputies from 2 to 3 FTE. So 3 bodies, no partial, 3. And 1 chief. And that total cost, by bumping up the chief, by bumping up to 3 deputies instead of just 2, we're proposing the third new deputy not have any shift differential associated with the cost of that person. So the kind of, it's not overtime specifically, but it's kind of like it's money to kind of cover additional unexpected time is the basic explanation, but Chief can dig into it if he wants. So the new deputy would not have that chief differential, additional shift differential. Thank you. I'm having trouble speaking English today, apparently. So the total cost of the third deputy of the contract, adding a new FTE, is $1.023 million. Okay, the delta there is the additional cost of 1 patrol officer is roughly $182,000. Those numbers, that $1.022 is what's in this proposed budget. Okay. Now, what's also in there is the proposed water bill fee of about $5 to $5.25. The new fee, if scaled appropriately, if done appropriately, kind of, set up and done appropriately, it would raise in this coming fiscal year, for 1 full year, it would raise almost, you could set it to raise exactly, the point is you could set it to raise it exactly what the cost is. So right now, at $5.20, if it's set up the way we could and should, it would raise virtually the same, exactly what we need. And that would, $5.20 raises just a little less than the $181,697. So negligible negative impact or negligible additional cost on the general fund would be caused by having that additional officer paid for by that roughly $5.20 monthly fee on the water bill for residents. Businesses would pay a sliding scale fee based on the size of their business. And talking to the chief, the actual number of incidents that police respond to actually have to do with businesses and then traffic accidents, that blah, 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 all that fun stuff. They get plenty of calls about speeding from residents. You get the occasional kind of serious incidents. But businesses based on their type and size definitely have a measurable bigger impact on service load, depending on the time of day, but certainly have that impact. And so businesses would not pay just $5 per month like residents. It would be based on the size of the business. So that's the second scenario that's in this proposed budget. The third scenario is to not have the water bill fee. So the cost is still a little over $1 million, $1.022 million. The additional cost of the police officer is still $181,697 in the current, in a new contract amendment to add the third deputy. And that would just be something absorbed by the general fund. I mean, realistically, it would probably need to be some mix of the water fund and the general fund paying for it. I don't think the general fund could absorb the whole thing. It would just be the water fund helping out in part at least, and that would just be a judgment call in terms of how much more to have the water fund help with it versus the general fund itself paying for it. But that's what it is with no new revenue source to absorb that additional, it's got to come from somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the scenarios and in turn relative to what's in the budget proposal right now.
So we know that people want a lot, they don't want to pay for it. We had a budget come out to, not a budget, but we went through this project exercise, and we know that it actually costs about $125 an hour. We put out we put to the voters a chance to pay for that and fix other things, and it was overwhelmingly said no to it. So we're using the water fund as like a backdoor. You can't do taxes, because taxes are fixed. So backdoor fee. What I'm suggesting is we ask for the levy. And if people really want it, they can pay for it.
We'll leave for you guys in city council. Commissioner McCall Wallace.
Sure. I left last meeting with this one sort of on the top of my mind, knowing that we've heard, no more fees, no more taxes, et cetera, but also that we've heard loud and clear, expand police services. One thing that really hit me is understanding that the one sergeant, 2 deputies was an adequate amount in 2017. And we are now have grown over 1,000, which is sort of that magic number, if I understand right, Chief Jones, that we've grown over that. And so now we're at that point where, we do need to expand the service. And the levy that was asked for before was an additional $36 a month, approximately average. But I left here, I thought, what am I paying in levies? I don't know. So I went and looked at my property tax bill, which I will honestly say, I only look at the total amount. I don't really dive into those, but I did this time. And in bonds, I'm paying $68 a month. My husband and I are paying. And an additional $31 a month in local option levies. Now, a couple of those do not directly benefit me in any way. I'm not going to community college. I don't have children in the school district. However, for the greater good, I am contributing to that. And in thinking about this, the community was not ready for a levy before. I don't know that they are right now. I think that asking me or anyone to pay per household approximately $5 to $5.50 or whatever it is, $5.25, is the stepping stone piece to get there. Because that for me is $2.75 a month that I will say, yes, I will support the community and help the community expand our police service in doing that. And I don't do that lightly. I don't say add another fee onto the bill or add another tax thing. But I have to also remember that I have $99 a month going out to fund the other stuff. And I want to do something here in North Plains that directly benefits the community. So I feel like doing the water bill fee makes sense until we're at that growth stage where we really need to do the levy. And the levy does provide more than that. It wasn't the same thing for the $36 a month. But, we will probably get to that point. All of the cities around us, Vernonia, Forest Grove, Cornelius, Hillsborough, et cetera, have those levies to help operate those systems because the property tax alone doesn't do that. So anyway, those were my thoughts on it. And I don't have a problem paying the $5.50, and I think that per household, that is not a lot to ask for the expanded service that the community is asking for all of us to support it.
Commissioner Dumbrell.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm gonna agree with Councilor Phage here. I mean, you got to pay for it somehow, but unfortunately, as we've seen in the past, the levy did not pass, and whatever the reasons were. So people need to have the opportunity to make the decision for themselves. Effectively, a backdoor fee, a water fee, is effectively a backdoor tax. Supreme Court's ruled on this. This is part of the whole Obamacare thing, whether you agree with it or not. Bottom line is that this is a tax, and it is not something that is in the best interest of the city. We do need to have another police officer. So either we need to cut something else out of the budget, or we need to go past the levy. That's our job. That's what what we got elected to do, or appointed in the case of budget. So I think that's my opinion. I don't think that that's something to hold the budget up over, but I'm just saying, I don't think that, I understand Councilor McCall Wallace's point, but at the same time, a fee is a tax by a different name that the voters don't get to vote on. So we passed Measure 5 and 50 for a reason. Whether we like it or not, we're stuck with it. So I think we have to let the voters decide what they want to pay for and what they don't.
I need to step back for just a minute, and I know that the priority that the city council set as number one was expanding the police. So the first thing I need to ask the city council members is, where is the report from Chief Jones indicating that the need for 24-hour service from our police department is necessary right now. And Commissioner Hagedorn, I think, or McCall Wallace, I'm not sure which one, said that people were clamoring for it. I watch all the social media, I'm attending city council meetings, I don't hear the clamoring. And I'm gonna go a little bit further and say that I agree with the backdoor fee. It is backdoor, and I'm gonna go back to 1990 when I was mayor here. Clean Water Services, that was not their name at the time. They said, oh, well, we need to do a surface water management fee on your sewer bill. And it was $3. It is now over $21 a month that, or 2 months that you're paying. Once there's a fee, it never goes away. Sorry, it just never goes away. The second thing is look at your cable and your telephone bills, and it's the exact same thing. The other thing is, how has this been communicated to the public? Where are the public? There's nobody here to talk about a $5 water fee for police protection. Nobody in support, nobody against. So how are we communicating this to people? I don't think there's been any communication. I'm kind of concerned about that. In the interest of transparency, I think needs to go out to the public before this budget is passed.
Thank you. Chief Jones is on the line with his hand raised. Chief Jones?
Can you guys hear me okay? Hopefully.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, very good. So just a couple notes. First off, to kind of give some context to the fee, I totally acknowledge it's kind of a sensitive issue. And I see the perspective of kind of the concept of it being a backdoor tax. And so I do acknowledge that it kind of feels that way, but this comes up in conversations a lot in the law enforcement community, especially in city municipalities that are trying to fund law enforcement services. This is not unique to something North Plains is trying. It came up recently in the chief's meeting where I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but tens of municipalities, if not dozens of municipalities in the state of Oregon that people are rattling off are going to this approach to help fund police services. And even here in Portland metro area, there's some local municipalities that are considering the same thing to try to help support funding their police department. So although it's a sensitive issue and I acknowledge that and it feels uncomfortable for some, it is not necessarily unique in what North Plains is trying to do to fund that additional FTE. And to answer Commissioner Hurst's questions about the need, in law enforcement, we like to take be as proactive as we can, right? Right now, we're very reactionary in North Plains, being the staffing that we are and the size of the city we are. Kind of that magic number we always try to strive for is 1 officer per 1,000 in population. And right now, the city of North Plains is sitting at 0.78 officers per 1,000, which is the lowest in Washington County, actually, as far as police services for the city. And along those same lines, back, I believe it was my January staff report, when you asked about my report to the council on the need, we averaged as a department 1,200 calls for service per FTE last year, 2024. And in comparison to our local municipalities, some a little larger, some a little smaller, Cornelius Banks, Forest Grove, Gaston, we did 1,200 average per FTE. Those cities were averaging 550 to 700 calls for service per FTE in 2024. So we're nearly doubling the work and that call volume on our deputies, the 3 of us full-time in North Plains, comparatively to our neighboring partners. So again, like we said earlier, our police level has not changed in a very long time. We've not matched growth. We're underserving as far as public safety is concerned in the city of North Plains at 0.78 per 1,000. Really, kind of hamstringing our ability to be more proactive. And again, serving 1,200 calls on average per FTE in a calendar year is nearly double what neighboring agencies are serving.
Thank you, Chief Jones.
Yeah.
Commissioner Hurst?
Chief Jones, thank you. I had not heard any of that information before. And I don't think anybody in town has heard that information before. Again, we're talking about communication to our residents of the need that we have here in town. And they need to know that they need to pay for it. Again, it's a transparency issue. I still think a fee is for paying for police services in this manner is backdoor, especially when we did go out for a levy and it was trounced. I think if we want to go out for a levy, then let's do that and let's educate our residents as to what it's going to cost them and why it's needed. I just don't think that putting it on the water bill is a good idea. And I personally cannot vote to forward this budget with that in there.
Thank you. I'll share my opinion on it. So the one thing that stood out in Chief Jones' presentation is 1,200 calls per FTE. What that says to me is someone that has a child, a wife here is if we had an emergency, they might show up, but they're gonna show up and give us as minimal service as possible to go on to the next call. And so, you know, if we have someone, I can just say, I've had to deal with this recently. I had a situation this week where someone was in a bad place mental health wise, and I had to step in. And like, if I had to do my job on top of doing that, on top, like, there's no way. And so when you're talking about police coverage, that's also a service they step in for. Is mental health crisis, is someone's, you know, saying, hey, I might hurt myself. In a scenario where you have 1,200 calls per FTE, they can go there and say, hey, good job, hope you're doing okay. Now it's time for me to go to the next call. And what do you know, that person could have probably killed themselves in the meantime because they did not have the time available to spend, like you said, on preventative care. But to the budget's concern, I agree. I agree because I was part of the local option levy committee and I saw it just go down in flames. And I've had this conversation about fees being backdoor taxes, and I agree with that sentiment. I guess where I have a challenge is sometimes, and this is my comment to city council here, sometimes you have to make hard decisions for the good of the community. That is what you're elected to do. And sometimes that means you're not gonna make everyone happy. You're gonna have people upset. But 1,200 calls per FTE is ridiculous. That is almost 3x what our neighboring cities are dealing with. So to my wonderful council members here, I'm just gonna say, you guys have a hard decision. This is a policy decision. This is not a budget decision, but you have a hard decision in front of you. And I just ask that you lead the city well. And that you understand that sometimes it means making a hard decision that half of your constituents are gonna be upset about, but then, or maybe not even half, maybe a fifth that are very loud. But then you have the rest of folks that are appreciative, knowing that we're gonna get better police service. As far as the budget's concerned, my recommendation would be to move forward without the fee added. And then I'm just going to say, city council, you have a hard work ahead of you of figuring out where that money's coming from. Commissioner Redding?
I don't know how to word it super appropriately, but if we go forward without approving it, because I guess before our last meeting, I surveyed 7 people quickly within town that I knew, which I know pros is biased, but they were the 7 that I chose, and 3 said yes, 4 said no. So it's a very tight, it's a very worrisome thing. I think someone brought up the fact that you could get your water turned off if you can't make the $60 a year. And that's something we also need to think about. And having something in place for those people. If we don't move forward with the $5, we go for the levy. If the levy fails, could we again reconvene and discuss it again?
Yeah, we have the ability
Is
to,
that
yeah, so
not
this body.
not to say to the voters, if you vote it no, we're doing this.
That is the beauty of this body is we can reconvene and city council, I believe, is the one that would essentially trigger that is if we come back for an amendment to the budget. But yes, we can come back and make changes to the budget. And yes, Commissioner Haggard.
I live in the software world and I live and my world is one tech and prioritizing things night and day, right?
Yep.
And so that's where I'm kind of wondering, is there any other trade-offs? Or is the levy the only way for us to get this moved forward? I see some of these hands, but that's the
Let's
question I wanted to.
Let Bill answer and then.
Well, I please go to Cindy first.
Actually, I found $118,000.
Oh,
I don't really think we need a parks program manager. I would rather have the police on the street than a parks program manager at $118,000. There you go.
And I'm saying this from a stance of public safety is kind of essential to our residents and to our businesses for vitality, right? If you want us to keep and maintain and stabilize our economic footprint, I do think that public safety would be a higher priority and essential if we wanted to grow
Yeah.
and nurture that.
I agree. I totally agree. And I'm not against
Right.
the money.
Yeah.
I'm against where we get it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I'm against.
So I ran a police levy. Failed bad. This town does not like taxes. At the same time, I think a process to look at is to run by an attempt to bond levy again. Do it more than what you need so that you can alleviate some of the funds elsewhere and shift it over to the police department if it passes. If it doesn't pass, you could still go back and look at the water bill. I think your idea is a good idea of the person you're just talking about. Let's see, I have one other thought. Oh, where to go? The water bill is, I'm an avid gardener and the water bill has gone so high, I can't afford to garden anymore, basically. And it's kind of pretty well upset me. When we tried to put in the pipeline into Hillsborough, we tried a levy, it failed. I thought it was a good idea because I could just claim it on my taxes. And it's the same thing with the police levy. I'm glad the chief gave that information because in my mind, up until that point, I'm going, well, the only people that I've heard complain is really not very many people. Occasionally on Facebook, you hear a big roar. But I didn't know. I'm really glad that the chief gave that information. I did a shift when I heard that. So I guess that's all. So maybe I'll remember what I forgot here in a second, so.
Hey, Bill, this is Larry Gonzalez. A quick question. I like the way everybody's thinking outside the box here a little bit. This is great. My question is more of a timing question. So if the city council decides they're not going to go for the water fee currently, and they're going to try for the levy, your budget is assuming, I mean, there's a gap, right? We're going to, between the time we put the levy on the ballot, the levy is either passed or not passed, and then we have to shift over to, are they, going to do the water fee or not the water fee? In the meantime, there's a gap in service coverage that the chief is trying to address or has brought to our attention. And I'm just trying to figure out, what's the impact on the services that the residents are getting, and how long will that will this whole levy, not levy, water fee, not water fee process delay the increase in service coverage?
Okay. Great question, actually. So let's talk fee on the water bill versus levy from a service delivery calendar standpoint, based on your question. A local option levy, if you were able to drum up support and then get it on the ballot, the soonest you could get it on the ballot, you'd have to file in August, would be the soonest you could file, and it would show up on the November ballot, this coming November. If you did that and it was approved, you wouldn't see revenue come until the following October. It would be a year after. So October of 2026. So you wouldn't have money in the door from a levy to start paying for additional service for over a year from right now, 18 months. Because you'd have to wait for the property tax revenue to come in. in the following fiscal year. So, but with a fee, as soon as you adopt a fee, we study it, we bring an approved methodology to council, they approve it, and it goes right on the water bill. The soonest water bill with additional communication, because presumably there would be a communication process. But you could get and you simply have to pass a resolution. To get a fee on the water bill, and you could do that and then in a much quicker fashion, basically deliver the additional police service with a fee. So there's no way around it. A levy, just the calendar for doing it, you wouldn't be able to do anything to your service level with that money for 18 months from now.
Okay, follow-up question, quick one. Let's say that, again, we're all sensitive to the whole levy, as tax issue. Is it possible to have the water fee be an interim fix and communicate that to the electorate and say, residents of North Plains, we're instituting this water fee, we're putting this other thing on this levy on the ballot, because of the 18 months that we'd be without the additional coverage that's needed, and if the levy's approved, the water fee goes away. If the levy is not approved, then there'll be additional discussion because the water fee is an interim fix. Is that a possibility?
Larry, I think you just hit the nail on the head with the last part of the sentence, or the last part of the question, which is if it's not approved, you've already rolled this out with the message of, hey, this is temporary, this is what we're thinking. And if you go back to, I'm not in politics, I'm just in government. If you go back to the public and say, hey, this is a temporary fix, we're gonna put this on the ballot, we wanna see if you guys are gonna pass it. And then they come back and they say, absolutely not. They vote that thing down to the ground and up in flames and back and forth. Then what are you gonna do is then you go back to them and say, well, now we have a budget deficit and this still needs to be there. So I know you guys said no, but guess what? We're gonna keep the fee on, even though it was a temporary fix. It's a political nightmare for the councilors that are involved in this process as well. So I don't think that just personally is a viable option.
And so my follow-up answer to that then, and again, reiterating what's already been said, I think the water fee is also a political hot potato. So my 2 cents.
Commissioner McCall-Wallace has been waiting patiently.
Respectfully, I hear the issue with the water fee. But I do also, I also did hear about the idea of dropping the parks programming, which is also a person that's doing multiple things. That's also a communications piece. We're talking about the transparency and getting the communication out there. That is a key for that. It also starts the beginnings of parks programming to support what also is being asked for in this community. And, it can't just all of a sudden pop up and be a whole full program unless we had lots of money dropped on our lap. It is a way to start the process so that we can start offerings for, children all the way through seniors and begin that idea of parks programming. And that has come to council as well over time. So I don't want to see that. I don't want to see it exchange one for the other. I don't think it's a one for the other situation. We get into the argument of, the mental health and being able to take care of yourself through those programs is well-being in itself and may keep you out of the police thing, but I don't want to do that. I think that we need to look at the issue with the police services. Are we at a point, do we hear enough about it? Is it really an issue enough? Is it, what's driving it? I hear the numbers, that's significant. So I'm wondering, how do we look at that in terms of, funding? Do we say, hey, hold on a little bit longer, we're gonna go after a levy? Is that what we do and go for that? I realize there's not an easy answer to sort of make it happen today, so to speak, or with this budget in the moment.
Sorry.
Just a question, this goes back to kind of like the message for the budget. We said we're gonna do a step graduation of services. So why are we jumping from 2 to 3? Is there a 2.5 option that maybe is, the temporary part is, we drop the parks for the beginning, do a funded 2.5 option. And then if the council wants to go for a levy a year from now, we get the levy to support the full 3 police, and then we have to meet again within a year anyway. So it's just, it may be a compromise to meet a couple of all the goals in there while still keeping us where we're at, then letting the voters decide if they really want to go to 3 and pay for the 3 police full-time FTEs.
Great question, Chief. Are you still on?
Yes, I am.
So
just-
my recollection about having partial shifts for police officers is that if you don't offer a full FTE, you have to try to get officers to bid on the partial shift. And that can sometimes be a difficult thing because it's like bidding on a part-time job. Is my understanding of that correct?
Yes, to a degree. It's difficult to assign somebody part-time, you know, in the terms of a half an FTE to a special assignment like North Plains, just for like scheduling simplicity sake, logistics, it's kind of a bit of an issue. Not saying that it's impossible, but it's certainly not ideal. And there's just kind of some, yeah, there's some logistical issues with it, but it's doable to a certain degree. We lose a lot of consistency within the city that way, and it's like I said, it's not really an ideal, meaningful step forward because it doesn't even, you know, a third FTE, a third deputy FTE doesn't even give us, you know, 24-hour coverage, but a couple nights a week, and it extends our coverage significantly on part of the week. But you know, so it's even the ultimate goal back in the days of the levy was the reason those numbers came into play was really the ultimate goal being a 24-hour police service. Even with 1 more FTE, that is an incremental step forward towards that goal, that ultimate goal. Obviously at a much less cost than what the levy was proposed in 2023. But a half FTE is kind of a real minuscule step forward. We're taking this smaller step forward with, you know, the suggested 1 FTE add versus what was tried with the LOL, if that makes sense.
So to follow up on that, my recollection is that because when there was a time in the last biennium when after the levy failed, the decision was, well, let's at least try to partly staff up in this manner, a partial FTE, just to add some overnight coverage occasionally. And the police chief at the time went through this process of trying to get bids or bid out, getting officers to come in for a partial FTE, a part-time position, basically, fill in hours. And we had bad luck with it. And what we ended up having to do to cover occasional overnight shifts was to basically lure people with overtime pay for the odd part FTE time. So it ended up being per hour more expensive because we couldn't get people to say, yeah, I'd love a half time part shift. So I guess all that is to say is it's doable, but it ends up kind of being surprisingly expensive to do it in a way. But I honor and it's not for me to say 1 FTE is better. That's that's kind of a community preference. But I will say that it's not as easy as saying it's not straightforward saying, well, just a half FTE and then get to a 1. It kind of gets complicated for that reason.
This is Larry Gonzalez again, real quick.
Larry, can I pause you real quick?
You can go.
All right.
It's on, yeah.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. When I hear this, bidding on time and overtime pay and et cetera, and then I hear from the chief about the numbers and the discrepancy between us and the other municipalities, I think to myself, what if the sheriff, what if the police can't in their next contract can't do 1,200? What if the only thing they can commit to is 800 calls? And so now we're looking at reduced services based on the desirability of, back to attracting people to to work the coverage for North Plains. I'm just looking at that going, oh, that's just seems like a slippery slope here.
I get to this. They've been waiting very patiently. Commissioner Hagedorn.
Oh, I was kind of thinking, I was just thinking, could we flip the script? You know, to be safe, I mean, safety is kind of essential to maintain and keep your residents, for people to utilize your services such as parks, go to your local businesses, et cetera, et cetera. What if we levied the parks person or programs, and could we flip that funding model?
Suggestion. I'm gonna keep going through. Commissioner Papen was next, and then sure, the board will be next.
In lieu of, yes.
So, I'm sorry, to clarify, so what, to flip that model, are you saying do the fee or do not?
It'll levy the park.
Oh, levy the park. Thank you.
Yeah, levy the parks. So essentially take that pay for the parks person and essentially just say, hey, this needs to be levied. Yeah. Commissioner Papen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to recognize everyone's hard work and trying to think outside the box. And I think we all are trying to go towards the same angle. But it's a really hard decision, right?
Yeah.
On trying to make everything align. I just wanted to just share, you know, previously as on council, when we were presented with a proposal for adding a fee onto the water bill for park maintenance, right? Essentially to be able to fund all of the grass and areas we have to mow in the city. I was against it then. I'm still against it now for police, and I am a huge supporter of the police. And at the end of the day, I want to be able to put my head on the pillow. And I have not heard an overwhelming response from residents that they want 24/7 police coverage. And I also recognize that I am just one piece in the puzzle, and my peers might have heard other feedback. However, I think to Commissioner Hurst's point, we do have an obligation to vocalize this and really be transparent with this process, because I think we have all at some point in our lives gotten a bill and we're like, oh my gosh, why is this so high? And there's a rate increase. And I think long-term, we think about Joint Water Commission, rates continually go up. I think the last one was 14%. We think about just our water rates that just increased again this last year. And everything will continue to raise. And I don't think that this is the right long-term solution for funding police. I think that we as a council and as a budget committee and also residents really have to take that hard step back and say, what do you want? Because this model is not sustainable. And I mentioned this a few weeks ago during budget priorities and council priorities, that funding police might work for this biennium, but we also know historically, Washington County Sheriff's Office raises their fees 5 to 8%, and correct me if I'm wrong, each year. And that is not something that we can negotiate, right? And that cost is going to continue to be passed along to our residents. That being said, it does not make sense to me why we are not looking long-term and realizing that our city is growing to a certain extent, but we're not adding tax base to be able to sustain these services. We know residential tax base does not bring in typically as much as we would see from commercial and industrial. And I'm not saying, I know that's in a whole other rabbit hole I'm not trying to go down, but I just, that is the long-term picture. I think this is a Band-Aid fix, but we are going to come up with this discussion year after year after year in this current model. So that portion, I just want to share, you know, right now, if I had to make a vote, would not be in favor for adding this to the water bill. I did want to clarify, Chief Jones, and I know you're having to come on and off mute, but if you could clarify, I heard a figure earlier that mentioned 1,200 calls per deputy. And I just wanted to clarify if I heard that correctly, and is that per year, or can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was an average of about 1,200 calls for service per FTE in North Plains for calendar year 2024. Versus our other local municipalities average anywhere from 550 to 700 and change was their average per FTE call volume.
Okay,
So-
and that includes self-initiated public demand, traffic stops, is that right?
That's all calls for service, yeah, across the board for all those comparisons. Mhm.
Okay,
Can I ask the chief a follow-up question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead then.
Is that, I'm sorry, I have a follow-up question to that. Is that, within the boundaries of North Plains at 1200?
Just so I understand, sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing you a little bit. Is that average call for service within the North Plains city limits? Is that what the question was?
That's correct.
Yes.
Yeah, the vast majority is yes. I can't give you the exact number, but it is going to be over 1,000 definitely per FTE. Very few of those are deputies working outside of the city limits, and you can see those in our monthly staff report. Those are broken down separately, and usually the difference is very small on a monthly basis. So I think an overestimation would be, a couple hundred on average.
Commissioner DePorch, been waiting patiently.
Yeah, I just wanted to toss out here, it was a great conversation. And it's a very difficult one. I was wondering if there's maybe an easier approach we could take. Instead of focusing on police and parks, which are very popular programs, do you think we could spend a couple minutes scrubbing the budget? And as an example, interest revenue has some assumptions on it that might be a little bit conservative. And before we walk away from some of those underlying economic assumptions, there might be money that we could find that could fund a police officer without the difficult conversation of the water bill or the levy. Like if you can solve it through just a little bit of pencil work, you might,
Yeah, I mean,
you might get there.
it's a great question. I guess what I would say is after trying to pull this together, I'm not gonna, I probably, because I looked, like, I know what the history is with this community about taxes and fees. So when I put it on the budget as a proposal, I don't do it flippantly. And that's not, so that isn't to say that I don't think more work can be done and maybe find, other resources potentially. But what I will say is that given what I did to try to avoid a fee or going that direction, the work I did put into it, I can continue and I might find more, but it won't be $180,000 probably. But it's a great question, and I'm not saying I'm not open to that, but it'd be a challenge. But let me just back up a second, if I might. This is a topic that is really tough not to get into policy questions.
Yep.
It's just tough to not do that, but we have. And let me just suggest this. We kind of have policy goggles on completely, and let me suggest putting the budget goggles, so to speak, back on. And here's what I would say. The task for this committee, I would just underscore, is approving money being spent on something for something. And the budget proposes enough money to add, the big thing is there's a budget for expense to be allowed to add 1 FTE police officer for 2 full years. And the job before, it also includes in the budget a revenue projection from a fee that would help pay for that. The budget by law, the power of the budget is in confining expenses, framing expenses by thing, by department, by fund, by function. And it enables the maximum that can be spent with oversight, of course, by the governing body. And I guess what I would put it to you is that it's up to you to approve how much money to be spent on this thing. But it's going to take council approving a contract amendment with Washington County to add the FTE. And it would take going through the process of studying a water bill fee, and going through to adopt it, or studying a levy and a levy committee and all that. But it would take a contract amendment to even spend the money on the fourth FTE. So there's that contract control too. Now, I'm not trying to say this to argue for approving another FTE, and I'm not trying to propose voting on the budget, endorsing the fee. What I'm proposing is perhaps we change in the budget as proposed, not calling it a water fee, but call it new revenue source to help supplement the general fund. And that might be a levy. It might be a levy that goes to parks. And then general fund money gets spent on police. But a new revenue source is identified to help fund what's in the general fund. Same amount of money. And then the budget for the police department, for public safety, the big question for you all is, do you want to authorize money to be spent on a fourth FTE, on a third deputy from July 1 forward? Or do you want to consider phasing it July 1, 2026? Only do it for a year, stick with the current, only budget enough money in the current for the first fiscal year, and then stair step it next year. You can do it a number of ways, but I just want to emphasize that it's about authorizing the money to be spent on it. And even if you authorize 2 full years of another FTE, we can't spend the money until council votes on amending that contract to add the FTE, and that's a whole resolution and public comment process. So I guess what I'm trying to do is unmarry the policy from the budget and emphasize it's the number you're here to approve. But it is tied. I don't want to make that, I don't want to, mislead you about that, but it is tied to a policy. It is. But the big question for you all is the number you want to authorize.
That's good guidance.
I had
Less
Commissioner Page, I believe, in his hand, and then Papen, and then McCall Wallace.
Yeah, I wanted to go back by the 1,200 calls. So there's between calls and there's like a very lot of for the police to have self-initiated. That could be like, oh, I want to drive around the block, self-initiated. There's a difference from calling, hey, we need help, versus what they report as like, I did this today. They didn't know it's just a DAR and the actual group thing, get their fun out. So 1,200 is calls, and Nate, if you're on, correct me if I'm wrong, but calls are different. The word calls makes you think that's going to cause you for help. 1,200, that's a lot, versus 50. And a lot more stuff is initiated. I'm gonna go grab this house because, the house is always a suspect. Or I'm gonna go park on this corner if you see people speaking. Those are different things.
My only comment to that would be if it's all Washington County and it's the same police force, the same training, you would expect that same practice would be taking place in the neighboring cities as well. So that wouldn't be an inflation. It would essentially be, they're all doing the same practice, so the number would rise equally together.
If the practice is the same.
Well, I would hope that our police are all trained the same.
Chief Jones.
Chief Jones.
Yeah, just to touch base on that, just real quick, we don't log, if we were going to drive around the block, we don't log that for a call for service, but Commissioner Page is corrected. It is self-initiated activity and public demand calls for service in that 1,200 figure. Now, with that being said, like I said earlier, really the emphasis of, effective public safety and law enforcement is more proactive than reactive. And our call for service numbers show that over the course of the year, that the more proactive we can be, the less reactive we have to be. And so, and yes, that is comparable, comparing the same bulk of calls, types of calls, self-initiated and public demand for those other municipalities, same comparison for North Plains. So yes, they're different geographically, but they're all serviced by Washington County as contract cities. And we're all trained the same. Like you said, we operate the same. We log our calls the same. So it is comparing apples to apples when you're looking at those other call volume numbers in other jurisdictions.
Thank you, Chief Jones. Commissioner Papen.
Thank you. I won't go too far into the weeds because I know we are trying to actually pass the budget tonight or, move forward in this process, but. I love to make data-driven decisions, and I actually went back to, one of the January city council minutes. Just to see that recap for the year, right? And, when I was going through and doing the math, self-initiated was more than triple actual public demand, right? And thank you to Chief Jones and staff for being proactive. But I think about, also the call volume during certain times of the day, right? And I'm looking at the math and I'm seeing, a range of 3 calls a day, right? If you do the math, for certain, depending if it's public demand or a traffic stop. So I mean, you think about all of 2024, there was 390 traffic stops. So, a little over 1 a day, right? And there's public demand as well. Citations, 44 for the entire year of 2024. So I think there's a lot of different components here, and I'm not trying to step on toes or say how to, how to police, but the data is not aligning for me to justify a third FTE.
Commissioner McCall-Wallace and then Commissioner Hagedorn.
Thank you for bringing up the policy versus not issue. It's very hard not to have that policy hat weigh heavily on your head. But the budget committee does not, and I took this down before, so I remember it, does not decide whether or not a service or a program should be provided. And so, it's very easy to slip into that in terms of taking out people or programs to do that. With that said, I just had a clarification question. When Bill, you were talking about, like we could, wait, say it happens mid-year or mid-biennium, or we look at, basically that there's a new revenue source. So to me, that's the same thing as option 3, saying that we're putting this in the budget and we don't have the money for it. And it's gonna have to come from somewhere. And so, yes, we're going to lose other things in this budget, whatever they will be. Or, we have the other 2 options, and I think we've completely ruled out the fee option. And I understand that wholly, but, which leaves the option of not moving forward at this point, and then trying to look at those other ways of doing that. So we're kind of looking at the 1 and 3 option. I kind of want to point that out to people.
I'd like to read something. This is actually a new comment from a resident as a result of the faux Walmart aggressive door knockers that I've been calling them. I think we as a community need to bring this up to the mayor and council for more police presence in this town. The amount of crime from people coming into our town, knowing we don't have a police presence, casing our house and our cars at night, and now at day is troubling. If we don't get the police presence here in town, we're going to see more and more uptick in these crimes. We need to band together as a community and make our voices heard about this issue. I don't know if any of you guys have been a victim of any community crimes, but I walked out to my car at night and it's been rifled through and it's a little bit concerning. So it's easy to speculate on the 1,200 hours or calls when you're not a part of that equation. When you call a cop, you don't care about where they are, you want them there right now. And so I just want to leave that with you guys here. We do need an FTE. I'm pro FTE and I'm pro prioritization of our needs as a community.
But there's also the problem that, with the company right there at that time, with the Walmart together there to catch, it's still like, that's not a guarantee that they're not gonna,
Understood.
yeah, that's just.
I'm not,
As
it's easier to put yourself and say that and mince and split hairs. But until when you have a need and you call upon it.
Yeah, 52, I probably had some experiences with being
So.
burglarized. But
We've been given 3 options, and do we have any other options? So let's just go back to what our choices are.
Their choice points I hear is H2O, fee. I heard a levy. I heard a flip the model within the budget. And then I heard, cutting out the parks as a choice point and potentially too.
Right, we're not the ones to decide what programs come and go.
Nope.
So Bill gave us three options. And I'm just asking if there were another one besides that. We had the no fund, we had the water fee, and we had the take it from the general fund and make it balance a different way. And David had
I
his
also
hand up.
suggested much earlier that the premium we're spending to have somebody an all-time coverage to 1.7.
Those were the budget options we had.
Yeah.
When David had his hand up. Sorry, Commissioner Hatcher.
Okay, the way I'm understanding what we're supposed to be doing. This has been offered as put in our budget. That's what we're looking at.
Yep.
That's it, period. If the money isn't there, and this is kind of a question, okay, the funds. It's budgeted for a police officer, not where the money comes from. If those funds does not come through. What happens? I mean, can we still approve the budget as is?
Because we're approving the authorization of spending, and that's really what we're doing, is we're approving the authorization to spend.
Right.
Exactly.
Yep, and that's it, that's,
And then
That's all
council
we're doing.
figures out the how and does the fist
Yep,
fighting
what-
later.
That's all we do.
Or you-
yep,
So one.
Yeah.
Let me throw out a suggestion here. If you're inclined to support as a committee, budget for a fourth FTE, a third patrol officer. Do so, and then pass a resolution or a statement by this committee charging city council at budget adoption time that the fourth FTE needs to have a revenue source to pay for, or something along those lines. Like, put it on council, don't hire the
Yeah, it's not us.
FTE until the revenue stream is identified, and have an ad hoc committee advise or whatever, and you could do that. You could say that at at the city council hearing, the budget committee has this.
Commissioner Hurst?
I just beamed that over to your head because I've written that. The exact same thing.
I wasn't
that
looking,
you
I was
said,
not looking at my phone's in my pocket.
that we
Yes.
recommend the budget as it's going forward, but the city council must put in place some kind of long-term plan to take care of the police services
Like it.
before expenditure or whatever. But pretty much what Bill said.
Yeah. Commissioner McCall.
So,
So-
but if this, so I'm hearing you say recommended going forward, but I also heard no water fee.
Yep, so it'd be
So
option three.
recommending it without that, recommending it with option 3, that it goes forward, make it work.
And then we.
And then when it goes to council, if there is a discussion, I'm just gonna sort of pre-think that for a moment, because we've had the discussion here tonight of various policy ways that would change a significant area in the budget, it's just gonna come right back here to this committee,
Yep.
correct?
5% or more.
So, about line item. Yeah,
So,
so if you take a program out, or you, as council, if we do something like that, it's gonna come right back
Yep.
here to this committee.
Right.
so my recommendation would be option 3, with the charge to council to find a revenue stream for it.
Exactly, and that's pretty much what I've written down, is that a recommendation of adopting this budget. But before initiating the water fee, that a full plan to fund police services for the long term be in place.
Commissioner Frost?
That's a recommendation now, that's not saying you must do it, it's a recommendation.
Totally.
And I would feel comfortable voting for that, knowing that it's not a done deal with the water fee.
Commissioner Frost?
So question, if we pass the budget as is with that caveat statement, whatever, that we put along with it, can we also add something along the lines of, if the water fee is selected as a method of funding, that it needs to be publicized to the residents?
Oh, absolutely.
So, I mean, so fundamentally, in order to have a water fee,
That's a council.
the council has to pass a resolution to put it on the bill. So it goes on an agenda, there's public testimony. Frankly, there's a bit of a study process to figure out kind of the methodology for how to do it. I mean, one thing I do want to say is that fees on water bills, they're all over the place. And I want to be clear about something, because I think Commissioner Dunbar said something about taxes and so forth, but I want to be clear and he's raised his hand, so he's ready to immediately argue with me. But what I do want to say is that under Oregon law, a tax is something that is on the value of something.
Yes.
So your property tax is on the value of your home. There's no sales tax in Oregon because the sales tax would be a rate on the value of what you purchased.
Yep.
Whereas a flat fee is a fee and it isn't on the value of anything. So in Oregon, at most cities in the state of Oregon, there is at least one fee. And we can do a work session about this. We did one prior, and so I can just fire up the same slides for city council at a work session. But Cornelius has a $12 fee for a number of services. Other cities just add one for parks, one for police, one for so-and-so. I'm not advocating for it. But what I do want to say is that this is well-trod territory by cities in Oregon. And it is a viable, if politically there's support for it, and that's you all. But it's well-trod territory legally, I guess is the bottom line.
Commissioner Dunbar.
Thank you. And Bill, yes, you're correct. It's technically not a tax. I understand that. I'm speaking more in broader terms, and at a federal level, courts have ruled that it is a tax. So there's a lot of case law around this that politically would make this not a great situation. But that aside, I'm just going to say that I agree with Commissioner Hurst and the other commissioners on, I personally prefer option 3, and I think that council needs to have a hard conversation. And I do not look forward to this conversation because it's probably going to involve somebody getting, something thrown at them, probably me. But seriously, I think that is the job. And I agree with Commissioner Hurst 100%. I don't want the water fee, and I'm very opposed to it. But I also think that we have to have a long-term funding source, to Councilor Papin's point. So yes, as long as we can agree that we are sending this to council with the strong recommendation that they need to figure this out, or that we need to figure this out, however that works, then I would support that based on what the other commissioners have said.
Thank you. Commissioner McCall-Wallace.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Dunbar, and Hurst and others for speaking up about, sort of the need in moving this forward. My concern is that we were given a proposed budget that had a fee in it. We said, no fee, we want to see this in here, but we're not seeing what that budget would look like. And so we're saying, we're not seeing the numbers. We're not seeing what the budget, I don't know I can't remember what the technical term is for you, Bill. The budget creator would do with that situation, because if we said, okay, we want you to do option 3, take $181,000 from the general fund and make that happen. It is not up to the council to tell you how to make that happen. It's up to you to tell us how you'd like to make that happen. And so my concern is we're trying to wrap this all up in a meeting today. We have another meeting on the calendar that we could come back to. And I know that's a lot of work in between that time, but I don't feel comfortable passing a budget that is $181,000 not balanced, basically.
And Commissioner DeForge also suggested some pencil work could be to do another rapid, reasonableness test as well, could also be another.
So what it sounds like is, we have the meeting already on the calendar. It sounds like, Bill, you have some more edits to do. And also but is there at least consensus that option 3 amongst the budget committee is the option that we want to see listed in the budget? With it, it's not, it takes out the sense that there's the expectation of that there's the water fee. And it just says, this is what the cost is, this is the expense. And again, let's think through the lens of, we are authorizing the expense, we're authorizing the spend. And so that's kind of what I want to get at is like, is there consensus that option 3 is what we want to see Bill come back to us next week with an edit that we can then view that budget and come to some consensus and hopefully recommend it for approval?
Agreed.
Yeah, so would that look like choice?
You say no.
to support
okay.
option three, essentially.
What's that?
So the next step would be Bill, sharpening all of his pencils.
Just like he did tonight with the stuff that we called out the first time. Bill would have to go back and he would have to make those edits. He would have to do that wonderful spreadsheet again that he shared with us tonight. And then tell us here that it is, and then also pencil it into the budget as well. Commissioner Payton?
Just want to make sure that that's enough time for Bill to be able to revise the budget so dramatically.
This guy has a calculator, I think tattooed or implanted in his hand.
Council, Commissioner Dumbrell.
Yeah, Commissioner Dumbrell first, and then we'll have Bill bring us.
Yes, so I'll say I concur with the caveat that I would like to see that $181,000 deficit come down. So yeah, I think that we to approve the budget next week, we'd be a lot closer as a committee or commission, whatever we are. If there's other areas that can be revised to get us down significantly closer to zero than 181,000. I mean, that's a large number to Councilor McCall's point. So I think if that would be the one thing that I would really like to see, but so yeah, otherwise I concur.
Thank you. Commissioner Gonzalez?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I have an issue per se, but we're putting an awful lot on Bill. And I think that, the budget committee is part of our job is, to look over the budget and give our input about where we think, some of this money should come from, because we're kind of putting the pressure on Bill with not a lot of guidance about, how is this going to impact priorities, and is this a good way to go? And I would think that we should give him a little bit more direction. Bill, what do you think?
I'm just gonna echo what Bill just said, because as someone that stares at budgets all day, it's not a big change. Bill just said that under your breath, and it's not a big change to go through and make that. Like, it's 2 clicks of a button, you're gonna see it, and then he's gonna go through and he's gonna sweep through and look and see if there's anywhere else you can trim fat.
So, well, I mean, this is, okay. Thank you, Larry, and everybody who are looking at this it's an easy math exercise. It's a matter of how I recommend it be done, but you have a number of options to pay for this. Number one, the one I would least recommend is let the general funds reserves dip further. This budget, as is with the water fee, has the general funds unobligated reserves dipping down to a little over 600,000, which is only 10% of the operating revenue for the biennium, and that's on the low side of what you should have for unobligated reserves. But a part of that could pay for the $182,000. You can also lean, at least in part, on the water fund. Its reserves are under this budget as is being drawn down, I believe, to 20% unobligated reserves, to 20% of operating revenue. That's in the okay range right now, but I don't know that I would go down too much more. Those are your 2 big levers, frankly. The unfunded mandate of option 3 would require some amount of the general funds reserves to be tapped, some amount of the water funds reserves to be tapped, or you assume you adopt a water rate increase as you need to actually, but a little bit more to help cover this. Or there is potentially pencil work. I've assumed 4% interest over the next 2 years being earned on money. 5's probably not aggressive. So there's probably, I mean, here the banker's right here. That's why I assumed 4. That's why I assumed 4. But because, well, I didn't think it was going to be as high as 5, so I wasn't going
That
to.
effective funds rate is 413 right now.
So I might be, yeah, so 4, I don't think 4 is, so there you go. So we're looking at maybe even a need to bring interest revenue down. But given that our reserves in the general fund and the water fund are coming down, the amount of money sitting in earned interest is going to be less anyway. By the way, this biennium, we've earned about $2.8 million in interest because we've had the reserves in the capital funds, but sitting while waiting or about to be spent on the projects we're doing.
And those reserves lower our below I can just say raise our credit rating, lower our cost for loans, right?
If we go out to borrow on a bond or something like that, your standing reserves are part of the equation, so. There is that, but, it's really just a matter of. Dipping into something. I mean, the other thing is trying to find, Larry's hand's still up, maybe he raised it, I don't know.
No, it's been.
The other
No,
thing is.
I have another question.
Okay.
Well, the other thing I was gonna say is, you're not gonna have a new police officer July 1. Phase it in the second year, and that cuts out half of that eliminates $181,000 out of the budget as is. Assume it'll take a year, have the fourth FTE, July 1, 2026, and take on half the additional costs. I mean, that's an option too. There's a variety of ways of doing it. I think what I would like to hear from the committee, as Larry pointed out regarding lack of guidance is, where is the preference to, I mean, I can give a recommendation, but, where's the preference for what to combine to make it happen without a guaranteed revenue stream?
Can I ask my follow-up question?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and so I applaud Bill for being willing to go through this and come back with a budget that doesn't require this 181 right away. But I would also like to see the caveat or the guidance to the city council, recommendation to city council that they really need to address this 181 in some way, shape, or form, because right now we're borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, when with the long-term solution is we need to come up with this money and probably more in order to cover these services.
So with option one, we stick with what we have. And we don't have to worry about the 7% increase per year. And we could try to get a bond, a levy to pay for it. That's probably where I would have to go as far as
Commissioner McCall Wallace, then Commissioner Hurst.
I was just gonna say that, my concern is the idea of the reserves. It's solving a problem for this biennial budget. It is not solving the long-term problem of sustainability. And that's where my concern sort of lives in that. And, sort of when do we, what are we gonna do in that place? And of course, there'd be recommendations that would come to council and council work to do on that. But the question then comes down to where's the council at in terms of that work as well?
Commissioner Hurst.
All the things that Bill said, things that he can look at. But I would like to see that at least, and I'll say it in this way, that the Parks Program Manager is not as important as a place. Okay, so that's an area that can be looked at. Or that the Parks Program Manager is not instituted for another year, giving us money for the police department, but then that's a council decision on how to handle that. But I'm just saying, those are things that can be looked at. I think that the council is going to have a tough decision on how to fund the police services long-term. But also, I think there's an opportunity for us as a budget committee to be educating our neighbors about what's going on, because if you take the 182,000 out of the general fund, you are now using 68% of my property taxes going to police, and the rest of it has to be distributed around. And people don't understand that. They don't understand how, they think, oh, we get all this, the water money. So it's going to be an education process, and I think as a budget committee member, I'm obligated to educate. So.
Yeah, definitely.
Dustin.
Just more of a thought experiment than anything, and I think we hit some of it on the head. It's like you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. The water fund, we have money in the water fund. For example, I have seismic upgrades that I need to do. I've got $500,000 set aside for various studies, whatever. I could easily put that over to 180,000. That does not solve the long-term problems that we have. And this isn't the only area that the water fund is supporting with the rest of the city. So a lot of the projects and the services that the water fund is meant to create, I wouldn't want to say sacrifice, but just keep that in mind to pay for some of these other services. It's like we can do it, but we're gonna have to figure that out somehow.
I just wanted to address the option of cutting the parks, the program supervisor position that's largely in parks. That position, salary and benefits would still leave about about $70,000 to find cuts elsewhere if that position's cut, because it is a markedly less expensive on an annual basis cost to the city, that position, versus the all-in, admittedly, equipment and everything else, cost for the additional law enforcement officer. So if that's the route to go, it can certainly be part of the strategy, but that still leaves a deficit of probably $70,000-ish.
So if we're only doing, if we put the fourth deputy at a 1 year, doesn't that take that 180 down?
Yeah, it's only 1 year of that additional cost.
So we'll be, basically we'll be covering the program manager on 1 year of the deputy.
It's gonna be about 10,000, 15,000 of a deficit between the two, but yeah, that's pretty close.
Is it 181 or 182 per year or biennium?
182 per year.
Thank you.
Oh, for you.
Oh,
Oh,
per year.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
Yeah.
182 per year.
Okay.
So this is the FY 26 confirmed number. FY 27 will be probably 7 to 8% higher than that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to see the numbers. I'm sorry, I misunderstood. I thought that was for the biennium.
Me too. No, that's per year for the additional.
More comfortable with.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I'd like to see the numbers. Yeah.
You're on the board for today if we could.
I know
All right,
it's
so what's our
gonna be hard.
direction to Bill for next time? What do we want?
Well, can I just say,
Yes,
if
please.
Bill brings us back the third option, what we will have before us at that point are the three options. We will literally have the don't do anything, one option. We will have the water fee option.
Yep.
And then we will have the other option and be able to then make a
Decide.
recommendation, I think more coherently. So.
Right.
I concur. Commissioner Teach?
I have a better idea than the water fee option. I don't think the water fee option is gonna, I don't know, you can go down if you want, then have 4 options. One of the water options on there. That's fine. I know that city managers love to have the water because you have to put it in once, once a day to raise it up, right? It's like Commissioner Hurd was saying. Can we put an option in there that if we get a levy to do it? This way, the
Well,
levy
just
doesn't
be
pass,
revenue.
we stay as we are.
So
Cause I think that's the way to go. If we want to pay for it, they have to go with their eyes open, pay for it.
we can, and so, a bit ago, so that would kind of fall under one of the suggestions I kind of threw out as a hypothetical, and that is that the budget as is could be changed so that it is not a water bill fee definitely and dedicated in the budget, but rather there is some new revenue stream going into the general fund sufficient to pay this. And we can just generally call it new revenue stream. And then it's up to council or whatever process to identify what that is and do it. But again, the power and the importance of passing a budget is to authorize spending to occur. Revenue projections are always wrong. You know, so saying there's going to be a water fee, you can adopt the budget as proposed with a proposed water fee, and it could be a completely wrong projection because council, agrees with the general assessment here that I ain't gonna do a water fee. It ends up being option 3. But the bottom line is that I can change it so that there is a new revenue stream for the general fund, and it's left to council to implement what that is. And so, but just right now, it's gonna be some combination, it's going to be a cut to some reserve. One of two operating funds reserves. Maybe an increase in the water fee rate increase July 1s. Or, some combination of cuts in that. That's really what we're talking about.
But as Commissioner McCall Wallace said, it sounds like we're gonna have all three options presented in front of us at our next budget committee meeting, and then we can further discuss which option we want to adopt.
And the options were do nothing, revenue stream, or a pencil work.
Essentially attack the general funds and see if there's some pencil work to be done.
Or trade-offs, choice points, or
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah.
Water,
Okay.
water, or fee-based, or
See,
the pencil work is.
what Mandy's saying.
option three.
I got you. Perfect.
Is it, now I'm confused. So I'm, because I think I'm hearing four options, but can you please go through them again?
Yeah, so there's option one is do nothing. We're gonna leave it alone. We're gonna not essentially bring on additional FTE. Where I think the confusion where the fourth option essentially is getting muddled in is instead of calling it water fee or local option levy, it's identify a new revenue stream. That's the second.
Exactly.
Yep.
That's the second option.
That's the second option. And then the third option is to tap into the general fund
Okay.
or
And
water fund, general or water.
and have Bill do his magic.
Yep,
Okay.
perfect. All right. You got any more slides for us?
Like magic.
That's fine.
Okay, if I might,
Yes, please.
were there any questions whatsoever on the urban renewal agency budget? Because if there weren't, that could be approved tonight.
Do we have to go out of this meeting and go into URA budget?
Lori, do we have to?
Yeah, we didn't post it, so no, that has to be posted for next
Yeah.
meeting.
All right, no, never mind.
Yep, I know, I like it, no.
That's why I wondered why we didn't have one.
Yeah. So yeah, we just need to make sure that's on the agenda.
Good.
Cool. What else? Is that the last slide you had for us?
Yeah, basically, so were there any objections to any of the changes I identified and proposed based on comment and questions at the last meeting? Sounds like there weren't. I just want to make sure.
Commissioner Redding.
I don't know how it all works, but is there any way, Bill, for you to break down some of these issues we've all talked about tonight? Or Facebook post for outreach, or how to, like you said, educate our fellow citizens. I mean, I loved all of our chat tonight, and you can't get that on council necessarily, and we're great populace.
I would
Great
look to
minds.
my elected officials to lead that discussion.
I think that's where the council comes in and they discuss different options and then they go out and talk to people.
Do we have that time if we're in?
Well, you can always pass the budget. You can always pass the budget and come back and change it. Yeah, you can always do that.
That's right.
So,
I think what she's asking for is, can there just be a little update that goes out that says,
Yeah.
this budget meeting happened, the hearing, these are the
Was
kinds of things that were discussed,
Mhm.
you know. Next
Minutes.
meeting is this date. And it's just to put it out there, is that what you mean?
Well, even a little bit more of saying, here's what our police calls are,
Oh,
but I don't know how much.
there is a link to the video.
There's a link to the video, we have meeting minutes, and then I'll just be blunt and frank, because that's usually what I am. I look to my elected officials to lead that discussion in the community.
Yeah.
Not my city staff.
Yeah.
If it's a policy issue, that's why you guys are in the hot seats.
Yeah, we have a whole bill to do that.
yeah, but I think until the council has a plan. I mean, I don't wanna go out and tell people, oh, your water bill's gonna go up $3, because the minute you say it, people are going to say, oh,
Yeah.
it's going up. Well, no, it's not.
I-
So I think,
Yeah.
It's
So-
having the tools to say, we've had 1,200 calls, but it's
Yeah.
like,
Oh,
you
yeah.
stated, this is your property tax and this is what it means,
Right.
and just all of the trade
in January
amounts.
It's all,
It's in our
that,
January
that has been
Alright.
in all the meetings.
Can we bring it in? We're having too much over talking.
Yeah, no, sorry.
So if I might, so Council Redding or Commissioner Redding, at this meeting, I guess, I think. Generally speaking, yes, I think there's a way to kind of update the public and say that, there's kind of a remaining topic of discussion and, before the budget gets approved and moved on to council. I think though, what we want to be careful about is this body as constructive and back and forth and leading to a constructive solution as well as this went. This was a great discussion, actually. It still got really policy instead of just budget.
Yeah.
And I would worry about communicating this in the wrong way that gets people worked up from a policy perspective, when really it's kind of through the budget lens.
Yeah.
So updating them, we just need to be careful to like not make it a, what, about this or that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So we would just need
It's
to do
that
it carefully is
delicate
all.
balance.
Yeah.
But it's the
It's
education
the
more than
education
the
piece
direction.
and, again, that's a council decision on how to educate the public. I know that the former city manager, Andy Varner, put several things in the city newsletter even before the serial levy went out for vote. And people still don't understand. They just don't understand. They don't want to understand. And that's hard. That's really hard.
I was so
Commissioner-
far, sorry.
Commissioner McCall Wallace.
Yeah, I want to say that, this is also, I will just say, we have lots of new council members on the, council right now. And this is part of that learning curve, to recognize that, budget discussions for the budget need to start a lot earlier, so we can start having them for the supplemental changes already, going forward. We can start talking about those things when we see that these stats already came to us, all of them, and that we point that out in some way. And I know that we don't have staff at this point for putting those kinds of communications out. That is part of what this budget does add in two areas.
I know.
So, we're working toward that direction. But again, that's all outside of budget committee, but I think it's an opportunity being on this process to see where we can be stronger going forward as a council.
Well, I'm sorry, as I said before, I'm a budget committee member and I believe in talking to my neighbors and educating them. And you'd be surprised how many people don't understand their property taxes, so.
Commissioner Page, I cut you off.
Yeah. So as far as reaching out to the people, I tried a couple of things. I went down to it's a spot. And I kind of said, come over here, I'll be here having coffee for 2 hours. I might even buy one. And nobody showed up. I got a lot of Facebook messages from people that live in the hills telling me I'm a bad person. But besides that, nobody showed up. I went to the Rogue and I had more people show up to have drinks with me, which by the end of the day, I was talking possible. But that seems to be something to do, make yourself available at a spot that people can get to, so.
Again, outside of budget, but a
Yeah.
town hall.
Yeah.
We have those.
Yeah.
I'm gonna bring us back in on budget, so that way we can also get back to our families tonight.
Yeah.
So is there any other further discussion before we convene this meeting, and we will be meeting next week? No? All right, I'm gonna go ahead and call the budget committee, 8:05. See you all next week.
Thank you, everybody. That was a great discussion.